Warning: the following audio production contains subject matter which some listeners may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised. Working Girls. Written and read by TARDIS9. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend Wilbert Audrey and Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends by Britt Allcroft and David Mitten. The branch line was once again short of an engine. Thomas had been sent to the works following his breakdown on the Santa Special. This meant that the other engines had to take on his duties as well as their own. They didn't mind though, especially when it came to taking Annie and Clarabel. Sometimes Percy would take them together with his stone trucks. Sometimes Toby added them to the vintage. Sometimes they would just take them on their own. Daisy took them too, when passenger schedules were reduced as the goods work became too heavy. Occasionally, Mavis would take over the passenger runs when her manager allowed her to do so. Even Bertie the bus sometimes ran special rail replacement services to carry their passengers. But all the same, everyone agreed that they needed another engine and soon. Traffic was increasing again, and the work became too overwhelming for them. "I can't keep up with this extra work," grumbled Mavis one evening. She had just brought some trucks from the quarry to the yard at Farquhar and was being fueled up before her journey home. Annie, Clarabel and Daisy were in the carriage sheds, while Toby and Percy stood on shed. Toby was being cleaned out before he was shut up for the night, while Percy was being prepared for his postal run. "We don't know whether we're coming or going with all this bustling around," agreed Toby. "Hear, hear, darlings," agreed Daisy. "I cannot believe I actually have to pull trucks again." She shuddered dreadfully at the thought. "Really, Daisy," chuckled Percy. "I would have thought you might have learned some sense by now. Engines are meant to pull trucks as well as coaches, you know." "Yes, and that's pull trucks, not swim with them, little Percy," sniffed Daisy.
"Oh, do stop arguing, you two," complained Annie. "You're both as bad as each other."
"Indeed," agreed Clarabel. "You both should know by now that anyone who wants to be really useful does the tasks they are given without fuss. Brake vans are not flatbeds, you know."
"Silence!"
thundered a well-known voice. The Fat Controller stood in the shed doors.
"I've heard," he continued, "that another engine is needed on the branch line, and I agree. I've made arrangements for another engine to help out on the line temporarily while Thomas is away."
Everyone was very relieved to hear this.
"Who is it, sir?"
Annie asked. "Will Duck be coming back?" asked Clarabel. "Or will it be Edward or one of the mainline engines?" asked Percy.
"I'm afraid not. The other engines are too busy, so I've made an arrangement with a company on the mainland. I was going to get another diesel engine on loan to help out in Vickerstown anyway, while Denise is being overhauled. Now it seems I've had to bring those plans forward for the engine to help out here first, before taking over her duties. He'll be arriving tomorrow. Please do your best to avoid any, disturbances."
He turned and walked away. The coaches and engines were left in a state of worry. "We haven't heard him talk like this for years," Elsie whispered. "What does that mean?" asked Victoria. "That means that this new engine will be difficult," Henrietta responded. "Be on your guard, everyone. I fear we're in for a rough time." And she was right. The next morning, Annie and Clarabel woke to the sound of a strange horn, one that they had never heard before. A diesel they didn't recognise clattered into the yard with some trucks. He was long and painted red and yellow, clearly built for mixed traffic workings and fresh from the factory. His body was rectangular, with a cab right in the middle of it, and he had the number 21612 on his sides, while railings surrounded his chassis. He seemed to have a smile on his face as he shunted the trucks into a siding.
"Pleasure doing business with you lads," he said as he shunted them into place.
"And you too,"
the trucks giggled. "What do you think of him?" asked Clarabel.
"I don't know," replied Annie, "but I have a bad feeling about him."
Daisy sidled into the shed next to them. "Take care with him, my dears," she warned. "He's not someone you would want to be involved with." Annie and Clarabel were surprised. Normally, Daisy never spoke to them unless they were teasing each other. If she was warning them, then they really were in for a rough time. "Why do you say that?" Clarabel asked. "Well, let's just say that what happened to me at the fuel tank this morning was more than enough for me to call him Bruiser," Daisy said with a shudder.
"Why?"
Annie asked. "I don't want to talk about it," mumbled Daisy sadly. Annie and Clarabel gulped. The big diesel rumbled towards them. His face changed from a smile to a scowl. He did not slow down when he approached them. Instead, he bumped them hard. "Oh, oh, oh!" screamed the coaches.
"Careful!"
"We're not cattle trucks, you know."
"Huh!"
grunted Bruiser. He was coupled up to them and pulled them sharply to the platform. He braked suddenly and the coaches banged into him. "Oh!" cried Annie as she and Clarabel bumped into each other. "Did you not hear us?" cried Clarabel to Bruiser. Bruiser said nothing. He just waited impatiently while the passengers climbed on board the coaches and started off when the guard blew his whistle. Annie and Clarabel stayed as silent as they could. He was a new engine and still young, they thought, so they decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. But as soon as they began to make their way back up the line towards Ulfstead, the coaches decided that the best way to encourage him to talk to them was through song. They looked around for inspiration and saw the sun shining in the sky, while sparrows danced through the air.
"The sun is shining, what a good day! The sun is shining, what a good day!"
sang Annie. "The birds in the sky sing tweet, tweet, tweet. The birds in the sky sing tweet, tweet, tweet," sang Clarabel. Suddenly they felt a massive jolt, and their buffers banged into each other. "Shut up!" yelled Bruiser. Annie and Clarabel were horrified. They had never been spoken to this rudely before. When they reached Ulfstead, they were very relieved. After that experience, they could see why he was called Bruiser. He ran around them and shunted them so hard into a siding that they hit the buffers with a thump, almost going right through them. "Ouch!" cried Annie. Clarabel had had enough. "Listen, you!" she snapped. "We can tolerate a few bumps here and there, but your behaviour towards us was nothing short of appalling."
"That's right," agreed Annie. "You're lucky you're not working with mainline coaches, my lad. Any of that and they'd sort you out."
Bruiser bumped them again. "Ow!" cried the coaches. "Shut up, you two!" Bruiser snorted.
"Women. You lot always complain about the tiniest little thing. I should be working with trucks, not ferrying passengers around like that stupid girl shunter, or those two old kettles should be doing. Freight is great, far greater than passengers any day."
"How dare you!" shouted Annie. really useful rolling stock do whatever job is given to them, Clarabel protested.
Yeah, whatever. You two are far from useful. You're just really useless and utterly hopeless. All you goddamn b****s are. If I had my way, you'd all be rolled onto the scrap heap, the whole lot of you! As it is, if you must exist, you must. But I'd far rather I didn't have to do a stupid girl's job like ferrying passengers around. He spat and rumbled quickly away to fetch his trucks.
Annie and Clarabel were horrified.
What a horrid engine!
Exclaimed Annie. I know, no manners at all, replied Clarabel.
Someone's going to have to trim his wheels for him,
Annie added. Exactly, agreed Clarabel. We're not useless at all.
Or hopeless for that matter,
replied Annie.
In fact, do you know what we are, Clarabel? We're working girls, you and I.
I couldn't agree more, my dear Annie. We're far more useful than he thinks, Clarabel said with passion. An attitude like that may well have been acceptable in Trevithwick's time, but not in the 21st century. He should go back to the days of the puffing devil. Clearly he belongs in the Victorian times.
I couldn't have put it better myself,
Annie finished.
Listen, this is what we'll do.
So the next time Bruiser took the coaches out, they made the trip difficult for him. They held back in the stations, they bumped him whenever they could, and they slipped their brakes on accidentally on purpose. But nothing happened. Both driver and guard checked them every time. They left their passengers at Knapford Junction and then returned home to Farquhar at the end of the day. All throughout their homeward trip, Clarabel sang songs deliberately, much to the annoyance of Bruiser. He tried to get her to shut up, but Annie interrupted him.
Be quiet, you bully, you!
She snapped.
Why don't you shut up like the rest of your gender should?
Bruiser retorted. The train rattled through the countryside, making such a noise that it woke up several houses as the insults continued. When at last they reached the shed, the two coaches were relieved. But not for long. Violently, Bruiser shunted them into the shed.
Listen, you stupid c***s. I've had enough of you! Any more of this tomorrow and I'll crush you both so hard you'll not even be fit for scrapping!
He thundered and moved off to the sheds. For a long time, there was silence. Then the coaches could hear three very loud voices coming from inside the engine shed. You're a disgrace! Yelled Percy. If you think you can treat Annie and Clarabel like that, you're on the wrong railway.
And don't think you can get away with what you did to Daisy this morning, raged Toby. I saw you pushing her out of the way like that while the fuel pipe was connected to her, and giving the workmen more work, cleaning up the fuel you spilt on the ground. You're a disgrace to the rails.
I'll shut up, you clapped out old waste bins, Bruiser snorted. I'm up to date and modern. I don't waste my time with work that's below me. Passenger work is girls' work. You just don't get it, do you? Squeaked Percy. Just because you're a different gender does not mean you're above doing a certain type of job.
Mavis is a girl, and she gets on just fine with her goods work,
Toby added.
You're lucky she's not here right now, otherwise she'd really be angry with you. You two old kettles are hopeless.
You never listen to sense, snapped Bruiser.
You'd just as soon sell your dignity to that fat Burke in the top hat. Those stupid girls are useless. Useless, you hear? They should be ferrying passengers around like you oldies should be doing. Yeah, like you, on a heritage line. Keep the main lines and branch lines for us real men.
Useless? Percy bellowed. Do you know how many times those girls have helped us? We were struggling without Daisy all those years ago.
And Mavis saved me from a nasty accident, Toby argued, remembering his tightrope. And besides, Annie and Clarabel have been putting in more hard work on this branch line than you have ever done, you wolf.
All you oldies are just as pathetic as girls anyway, sniffed Bruiser. Annie and Clarabel broke off listening. when they saw Daisy come into the sheds. "You heard about it, I take it," she said mournfully.
"Yes, we did,"
replied Annie. "Did he really bump you?" asked Clarabel. Daisy said nothing. She just looked down at her buffers. "We saw it with our own eyes," confirmed Henrietta. "What have we girls ever done to him?" demanded Victoria. "That Bruiser needs to be taught a lesson," finished Elsie. Everyone agreed that something must be done, but none knew what. Engines have isolating valves in their brake pipes. When the valves are open, the air is sucked out of the pipes and the train's brakes are applied. When they are closed, the air stays in the pipes and the brakes do not come on. Recently, Annie and Clarabel had these fitted, and Clarabel was now equipped with special emergency brakes that she could use in a crisis. They felt it was unfitting for two coaches their age to be fitted with such things, but both understood that it was essential to avoid a runaway situation. They remembered all too well what had happened to them and Thomas when they ran away. The next day, Bruiser was taking them on a passenger run. The journey had not been pleasant. All throughout the trip, he bumped and banged them so hard that the passengers complained at every station. But Annie and Clarabel didn't complain. They knew that trying to make Bruiser see reason would be an uphill struggle. Besides, they had more cause for concern. Every time Bruiser tried to stop, his vacuum brakes wouldn't respond. His isolating valves were jammed shut, meaning that he couldn't apply them. Several times he almost overshot the platform, only stopping because the driver had applied his locomotive brakes. Bruiser grew crosser and crosser. "Move it, you!" he snorted to the coaches, jerking at their couplings.
Oh!
Screamed Annie and Clarabel as they left Elsbridge. The train picked up more and more speed as they passed the signal box before the main line. A distant signal warned them that the junction was near. Every wise engine knows to slow down when they see this signal, but Bruiser was so cross that he didn't care what he did. His driver had also been distracted and hadn't paid attention to the signal. It might have been better if he had. Too late, both engine and driver realised where they were and went into a panic. "Stop! Stop!" Bruiser hollered, but he couldn't stop. His vacuum brakes were still jammed and Annie and Clarabel were carrying a full load of passengers. His locomotive brakes, the one hope he had of stopping the train, were now powerless against the weight behind him at the speed he was travelling at. He, the driver, and the coaches looked on ahead in horror. The station loomed over them. A loud whistle could be heard in the distance. Gordon and the express were due in any minute if they didn't stop in time. Annie and Clarabel didn't dare think about it. Instead, they sprang into action. They knew exactly what to do. Clarabel's emergency brakes came on with a squeal, and she and Annie held back for dear life. Passengers stood back on the edge of the platform, curious and worried at the sight of the train racing through the station. The fat controller was among them. His mouth dropped wide open when he saw the sparks flying from their wheels. "Good grief!" he exclaimed. But Annie and Clarabel took no notice of him. All they were concerned about now was stopping the train before it hit the points. Gordon thundered into view just around the corner. He could see everything, and his brakes came on sharply as he whistled long, loud, and furiously. Everyone shut their eyes and braced for impact as, slowly but surely, the train began to slow down. For a long time, the air was filled with the sound of brakes screeching hard on. Then there was silence. Slowly, carefully, Everyone opened their eyes, anticipating a disaster. They expected to see the wreckage of 2 trains having collided head-on into each other. What they saw instead was Gordon in a cloud of steam and seething furiously just before the platform, while Bruiser stood just in front of the points, his buffers only millimeters away from the brake coach. Bruiser sheepishly shunted his train back to the station platform, while Gordon moved his coaches onto the other line. He glared angrily at Bruiser.
"What the devil do you think you're playing at?"
he thundered.
"That's exactly what I want to know, Gordon,"
added the Fat Controller. There was some discussion between him, Gordon's firemen, the drivers, guards, and the station staff. They looked Bruiser all over, while the passengers bombarded the Fat Controller with complaints, telling him what a bad railway it was. Presently, the crew members explained their findings to the Fat Controller. Amidst the complaints of the passengers, he turned to Bruiser's driver.
"Carrying on with a failed brake pipe, failing to report it to the guard, let alone make a record of it, keeping a faulty engine on the train, not paying attention to signals. You're going to have to give your employers a very good reason not to give you the sack, my man," the Fat Controller scolded Bruiser's driver. He said nothing, but looked down at his feet, embarrassed. Bruiser just sniffed haughtily. "As for you,"
scolded the Fat Controller, glaring at him,
"you've been worse. Bumping engines and coaches, wasting diesel fuel, not just insulting my engines, but also making vulgar and offensive remarks about their sex. I was a fool to let you onto my railway in the first place."
He turned to the angry crowd, climbed up onto a crate and blew the guard's whistle so loudly that they all stopped to look at him.
"Ladies, gentlemen, and engines," he said, "I cannot apologize enough for all that has happened. The near miss, which almost cost us our lives,"
here he glared coldly at Bruiser,
"was caused by an engine on loan from another company. But this engine has done more than that. In the space of 2 short days, he has abused other rolling stock because of their gender, wasted good valuable diesel fuel, and now, because of the negligence of both himself and his driver, has put all our lives at risk. I've said once before that everyone, regardless of whatever differences they may have, is welcome on my railway, and that those who hold these individuals in contempt are forbidden to use it. Such is now the case. Rest assured, this matter will be dealt with."
He turned to Bruiser and his driver.
"Uncouple yourselves from those coaches and get off my railway," he said. "I don't want to see either of you two anywhere near my rolling stock ever again."
As the driver did so, the Fat Controller turned back to the crowds and continued.
"In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I've made other arrangements, and a replacement engine will soon arrive to take all passengers bound for the branch line home. But I think," he said with a smile slowly spreading across his face, "we can all take pride in the actions taken by 2 very special coaches today. Were it not for Annie and Clarabel's quick thinking, this whole incident would have ended in disaster. We owe them our lives. I say 3 cheers for Annie and Clarabel."
The applause that met this could be heard for miles around, while Bruiser sank silently away in disgrace. That evening, the Fat Controller came to the sheds.
"Annie, Clarabel, and Daisy," he said, "I'm so sorry you had to go through all this. If I'd known that engine would be so disrespectful to you, I'd have never have allowed him to come here."
"It wasn't your fault, sir," Annie reassured him. You weren't to know about him, Clarabel added in agreement.
I suppose so,
the Fat Controller said thoughtfully.
And thank you, Annie and Clarabel. If it weren't for you, many people would have been killed in a very nasty accident. But your quick thinking saved us all. I'm very proud of you two. You are both really useful coaches. Tomorrow, after your last train, you shall both have a new coat of paint.
Oh, thank you, sir, smiled the coaches. But, sir, asked Daisy, what will you do about an extra engine? We can't manage all the passenger work ourselves, even with Bertie and Mavis's help. And besides, you still need a station pilot for when Denise is away.
I'm aware of that, said the Fat Controller. I've made arrangements with a heritage railway on the mainland to send one of their diesels to take over from Denise. As for Thomas, well, see for yourself.
Everyone looked confused and wondered what he meant. Just then they heard a familiar whistle. Thomas came puffing into the yard and stopped just outside the sheds. They repaired me as good as new and did a thorough inspection this time, he beamed. No more sudden breakdowns anytime soon.
I should hope not,
laughed Danny. We'd rather stick to engines who appreciate us working girls, thank you very much, chuckled Clarabel. And they told him everything that had happened over the last 2 days. Annie and Clarabel are much happier now that Thomas is back. They run their trains right on time without any complaints, and enjoy singing little songs to each other, just as they used to so long ago. If ever anyone makes offensive remarks about their genders, however, neither Annie nor Clarabel are too afraid to show them just what they think of them. Both remind others that it is wrong to disrespect girls, and that what we do is not defined by our gender. And both are determined to remain working girls right to the very end.